Hey y'all, Austin here with Outer World Media. Welcome back to another video, guys. This is video number 4 for me, back to back to back to back shooting reviews. So bear with me. I might get a little tongue-tied, if you will, but this is going to be the longest book review that I have planned out of these 4. So I wanted to save this one for last and make sure I had those other ones done. But if you could tell by the title of this video, guys, we are talking about Stephen King's The Stand. And I'm just going to get straight into it, guys. You know, what is this book about? I feel like everybody knows what this book is about, and there's, I feel like probably hundreds, if not 1,000 reviews out there of this book. You know, this book became more prominent after, 2020 and that the virus and all that, and this book I feel like had a resurgence. And then there was I think it was Paramount I don't even know what to call it, Paramount recording, whatever, duplicate, newer version of this. I don't know. I know there was one back in the 90s of this. Oh, what is it, 94 I think is when this came out. Yes, 94, coming to a video fall of 94 is what the back of this says. Reimagining, I don't know what you want to call it, but it was a newer version of The Stand. But I wanted to get on here and talk about this book because I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background. I've tried to read this book probably 4 or 5 times. I've gotten, maybe a couple hundred pages in and just stopped, just thought this book was never going to be. For me, it's a very daunting book. Even after I finish it, this is still a very daunting book. But I just wanted to get my 2 cents, my opinion out here. There's people that I admire their opinion on books, such as Mike's Book Reviews, Brian Lee Durfee's, Frosty Knives. If you don't know who they are, look them up. But there's, people out there that didn't really, enjoy this book, that I still respect their opinion, such as Dustin Ely. I know Dustin did not like this book at all. Dustin doesn't really like any Stephen King books. But you know what? I admire the fact that he has read or, attempted to read a good amount of King books to decide, hey, he's just not for me. And that's what I wanted to get into, starting off with this book, again, can seem very daunting and may not seem like it might not be for you. But I think this is a book that everybody should try to read at least once and get 300 or 400 pages in and see if it's connecting with you. But enough of that, prelude crap. Let's get into it. What is The Stand about? Most people know what this is about, but essentially a plague known as Captain Trips has taken over the world, predominantly the U.S., and that's where this takes place. And so I think it's like 98 or 99% of the U.S., if not the world's population, is wiped out and whatnot. And so we are following some, I don't want to say stragglers, but survivors, if you will. And I've seen a few videos of people talking about who the main characters are on this, and I'm going to give you who I think the main characters are. There's 4 of them. There's numerous, and I probably should have kept track of how many characters are referenced in this. There's numerous characters. So if you're not somebody who, can keep up with a lot of people very easily, it might be a good idea in this instance to get a notepad, write a name down, kind of write a little bit, cliff notes, kind of who they are, what they're about, and whatnot. And I think that will definitely help you. But I think by the time you're probably 3/4 of the way through this book, you're going to know who everybody is in this book as far as when they get referenced. But this story follows 4 main characters. And again, there's numerous characters that we follow in this, that we see their point of views. But these are the main 4. We have Stu Redman, who is a good old boy from Texas. Yes, he's down here in the South in Texas. We have Franny, who is in, I think it's Maine, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but I believe it's Maine. We have Nick, who is and I'm going to kind of go in depth here in a little bit through each character. But we have Nick, who is essentially he's a person who can't hear, can't speak. So he ends up writing notes so people can read that to see what he has to say. And then we have Larry Underwood. So kind of getting into the main characters. And again, guys, I do apologize if I keep messing with my nose. We had a huge dust storm yesterday. It was like the Dust Bowl times 100 in my opinion. And it's messing with my allergies. But getting into it, how, again, we see in this book the survivors and whatnot, predominantly following these four characters. But we see two branches come up out of the ashes of the world, or the U.S., kind of just decomposing of itself. We see the good guys and the bad guys. The good guys are taking up, and again, guys, I do apologize for messing with my nose. The good guys are taking up refuge in Colorado, whereas the bad guys are taking up refuge in Las Vegas. Yes, Sin City. And so it's this whole story is a fight between good and evil, and getting into it a little bit more in depth, even the good guys have to make tough decisions, and you'll see that if you get far enough into this book. But yeah, that's kind of what we see. We delve into, and the main bad guy in this is Randall Flagg, who, not spoiling anything for anybody, but he plays a very, very prominent role in quite a few Stephen King books. But this is the first time that we see him and that he is referenced. But getting into a little bit more in depth in the characters. Again, we have Stu Redman, who is a good old boy from down here in Texas. Stu, we read about him in the first couple chapters, and we're introduced to him. He is probably, he's got to be my favorite character, in this story. Stu is definitely, he's a little older, he's seen some things, he's been around the block and whatnot. We find out as the story goes on some more about stuff that happened to him before, this virus took over. Captain Trips is what it's referred to as in the story. So, and then we are introduced to Franny, for all things that are good, tries her best. She is very, very level-headed woman. She is not someone to take lightly, but she does definitely, as you read the story, need people to rely on, or at least a person or two to have her back and whatnot. Nick is just somebody who, again, he can't speak, can't hear. He writes notes. I really enjoyed reading, the sections about Nick. I enjoyed all these characters, and I'll get a little bit more into that here later in the review. And then we have Larry Underwood. Larry, and I think the best comparison that I've heard for Larry, and I'm going to steal Dustin's comparison here. Larry is somebody who is kind of aloof, if you will. He's like Jake Spoon, is what Dustin says from Lonesome Dove. If you haven't read Lonesome Dove, highly recommend that book. But I think that's the best comparison for Larry, and I'm sorry, Dustin, but I'm going to steal that comparison. But again, guys, those are the four main characters, and we're introduced to so many different characters in this that you grow to either love, hate, despise, whatever, all these characters at some point in time. And that's going to get into one thing, probably one of my favorite things about this book, is that there are characters in here. There was one character who I could take or leave. I didn't really care about them. I knew they were going to be a bad guy, as the book went on. And there's a scene in this, or a chapter, that I did not enjoy. I'm not going to lie. I didn't enjoy it. But King somehow took this character that I didn't really care about, one way or another, who I knew, okay, he's a bad guy, but really, and somehow made him very, very sympathetic, to the point that I was like, okay, something needs to happen. I don't want this happening to this guy. I don't want this happening to anybody in general, but I don't want this happening to this guy. And I kind of was rooting a little bit for him as the story went on. Some other good things, like I said, even the good characters in this have to make tough choices that don't necessarily make them, black and white as far as good and evil, good and bad. They make some decisions that I'm like, I don't know what I would do in that instance. That's probably not a good, what a clear-coded, clean, squeaky, good guy would choose to do. But you know what? You gotta do what you gotta do. Another good thing about this book was just the scope of this book. Because again, guys, this is, what was it? A little under 1,200 pages. 1,100, a little under 1,150 pages. And I blew through this in a little over a week this time. The scope of this book, and just the fact that we cover so much of the U.S. in this, I really wish King had just kept going with this story. If this had been 1,600 pages, I'd have been just fine with it. I really would have. As the story was getting closer and closer to the end, I was getting excited because I knew I'm actually going to read The Stand and finish it. But then the thought popped in my mind of, well, I'm not going to be able to stay with these characters anymore, And that's something I also want to point. No character is safe in this book. I know a lot of people say that for like Game of Thrones. It's true in this story. Characters you hate, you may like. Characters you like, you may hate. And nobody is safe in this book. Just know that going into it. So don't grow too attached to some of these characters, but you can't help but not grow attached to them. Like I said, this was one I really, really enjoyed this. I'm not going to lie, there was two parts that stick out in my mind where I was like, okay, can we get back to the characters that I was really enjoying? Not that I wasn't enjoying these people or whatnot, but I was like, you know what? I really have grown attached to these characters. I really want to read these characters. But I still enjoyed those chapters, and I just want to be obvious, completely obvious with you guys and honest and whatnot. I don't want you coming on here thinking that I'm going to lie and sell you a load of crap or anything like that. So again, there's two small little parts in this story that I was like, okay, can we get back to these other characters? But again, guys, really enjoyed them. This is one, I'm not going to lie, guys, and this is probably going to start to wrap up the video because, again, I don't want to go too in-depth in this story because I think this is one that everybody should read. I told my wife, I got home from work, sat down, started reading. I had like 30 pages left, and my wife asked me, what are you going to read next? And I'm not going to lie, guys. I looked at her and said, I'm kind of tempted just to go back to page 1 and read this over again. That is how much I enjoyed this. This was one, I see why a lot of people say this is their favorite King story. I'm not going to lie. This is definitely up there for me. This is, if I was on a deserted island, and, everybody talks about that, deserted island. If you could only take 3 or 4 or 5, how many books with you, what would you take? This is probably going to be one of them. Not just because of how long it is and how entertaining it is, but the characters. I grew attached to characters in this, and when something happened to one or two of them, and I'd seen the 90s miniseries when I was a kid. There's some stuff that I forgot, quite a bit that I forgot, but when there's a couple things that happened to a couple characters in here, it hit home, guys. It made me kind of mad at King for doing that to a character that I really enjoyed. Excuse me, guys. Again, it's really dusty here in West Texas. But again, guys, this is one I'm not going to lie, I'm still fighting the urge not to go back to page 1 and reread this. As soon as I finished this, I told my wife, I said, I got to get a hardcover copy of this. And that's typically what I do is, if I get a paperback and I really enjoy the book, I buy a hardcover copy. This, guys, I'm not going to lie, this is one I will revisit probably numerous times just because of how much I enjoyed it. I recommend definitely give this book a shot, give it a try. I think if you can make it about 300 or 400 pages in, you will grow attached to these characters and you will stick with them and see what happens and want to, cheer them on. And yell at them sometimes because they do something that you're like, come on, you got to know better than that, But again, guys, Stephen King's The Stand. This is a 5-star book in my opinion. I know there's going to be people out there that don't agree with me or that do. And again, everybody to each their own, but this is a 5-star book for me. Easily. I love this book. I want to reread this book. I'm not going to lie. Again, this book is a little beat up and tattered because I was taking this in the car and reading this with me. I could not put this book down. I would stay up till 2 a.m. reading this book. I really, really enjoyed this book. That is definitely one of my favorite King stories of all time, guys, and one that I will definitely be revisiting that. And I know I sound like a broken record, but I just want to get across to you guys how much and how immensely I enjoyed that book. But again, guys, that is my review for Stephen King's The Stand. Give it a shot. Watch the miniseries. I know I need to get my hands on the Paramount remake is, I guess, the best term for it, of The Stand and see how close it is to the book. But again, guys, as always, thank you for stopping by, and I will see you guys next time.